Welcome to this episode of the Be in the Know podcast, brought to you by our team at Stiles Financial Services. Each episode, we pick a topic and attack it from all angles, delivering insight and knowledge to you, our listeners. I'm Kristine Meyer, and this is part 2 of my conversation with Brandon Vitale and Brad Fox to talk real estate. But this time, we're discussing real estate as an investment. We talk through the types of investment properties, what are some unexpected considerations, and how to assemble a team to manage your investment in both physical and financial ways. So there has been discussion on really the primary way that people start to accumulate wealth or an asset is their home. So for those that can get their financial house in order to be able to go and buy their first home, besides, the great financial crisis, as we talked through, generally they appreciate in value over time. And the longer you're there, the more value you're going to get out of it. And there's opportunities for improvement in your own home to add value onto that as well. So for some people, they, buy their forever house, they stay there. And other people might buy and stay there for a little bit and then upsize, and then they may sell their prior home, or they may look at turning it into an investment property. So that's one option for it. Another is to buy just properties to be able to make rental properties out of them. So we're going to talk about that as well. Then at the end, I'll wrap up with some discussion about financial considerations and how that affects your taxes, your income, and things to think about in that as well. All right. So first introduction today, I would love to have my first guest, Brad, give us a little introduction to himself.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I am a 20-year veteran, I guess, of the real estate industry, both real estate as a broker and a realtor, and then also now as a general contractor. So we've kind of gone across the board of residential real estate.
Great. And my second guest today is Brandon. Brandon, why don't you give us a little introduction about yourself?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks again for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And I'm Brandon Vitale, and I've been living in this wonderful world of mortgage for about 23 years, and work with the whole gamut of first-time home buyers up to the wealthy buyers, I guess we'd call it. Or
yeah.
Jumbo.
The jumbo. That is a thing, jumbo.
The jumbos.
The jumbos. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate you guys being here and contributing to our discussion today. So I talked a little bit about properties and how they appreciate over time. So that's one way to kind of gain some value out of an investment, but another is to create an income stream off of them too. So we have talked about how you should get yourself in order for a home purchase, but I would love to hear from Brandon on what are some considerations for people that are looking to buy an investment property in addition to the home that they own. Whether that's leveraging or outright capital, what do you see for people when they're trying to go that route?
Yeah, so first of all, I love this topic because I'm a big believer that real estate should be a part of your wealth building. Whether you just take the leap and become a full-time real estate investor, that's one thing. But I think everybody should have 2, 3, 4 pieces of property. I mean, nothing sweeter than having somebody literally pay down your mortgage. So when that's all paid off, you just have pieces of land.
Right.
I mean, talk about financial freedom, like when you want to retire. So I love this topic. I love the idea of getting your home, right? This is important too, but as a part of your wealth. So the financial considerations, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to buy investment property. Let's start with kind of the first-time home buyer, and this is something maybe you guys have heard about. It's home buying hack, right? So this is out there on TikTok and everywhere else. But ultimately, if you buy a home as a primary residence, you can put as little as 3.5% down. You have to live there for a year, and then you can move to another property, put as little as 3.5% down, rinse and repeat until you have 4 pieces of property. I'm seeing people do it with single-family homes, a lot of multi-family homes. Why this is important is because if you're buying a home, you have a primary, and you're buying just a straight investment, then you have to put like at least 20% down, sometimes 25%. So this is a strategic way to start building some homes before you get into your single-family home. And then if it's a duplex or multifamily, and you live in one of them, well, then you already got somebody starting to pay your mortgage for you. So So that's one component of it. I don't know how far we want to get into this. It's going to get into the weeds.
Go into the weeds.
Go
into the weeds.
Yeah. So if you are a current home owner, like I said, if you're buying an investment property, generally it's going to be like 20-25% down, depending on what type of property and the loan amounts and the price and things like that. But one thing, it's a little trick that I've learned, if you want to incorporate as opposed to just a straight rental, you want to do a short-term rental, which is our VRBO. This has become pretty big since COVID. You have to be very careful on what you purchase. I'm interested to hear Brad's take on it. I'm just talking about the dollars. You can't just buy anything. Let's start by saying that.
Yeah. Great point.
But if that's something that you want to do, and it works out to, based on logistics of where you live versus the property, and a lot of ins and outs, so I don't want to go into all of that, but that could be purchased as quote unquote a second home if you're going to stay there for 2 weeks out of the year, and then you could short-term rent it for the rest of the time. You can do those with 10% down. So that's another strategy and different type of property with less out of pocket that comes with maybe a little more work, and again, whole conversations about those types of properties. But those are, I guess, the kind of main things I'm saying and some strategies I'm using.
Okay, great. Anything you want to add on that, Brad, for the types of properties and considerations?
I love that. My wife and I do not have any rental properties. We do have a short-term rental property, vacation home. That was the avenue that we chose because we could, in theory, put 10% down and still collect rent against it. It effectively turns out the same as having a duplex or something here in town. Ours is in California. That comes with a lot of logistical, additional costs. So you have to consider all of that, I would say. And I think we'll get into that as well. But that's a huge thing. Just kind of like we spoke about before, it's not just your payment, your taxes, and your insurance.
Right.
There's a lot there. And I would always advise people to just, make a spreadsheet and, every potential cost you can think of, put that in there just to make sure you're comfortable. But yeah, I think and I think the short-term rental market has calmed down a little bit with COVID, going away. It got incredibly insane for a while there. But I think there are some really smart pockets you can still do that. I hear a lot of lake home conversations about that. Making your lake home your second home, possibly having the opportunity to do 10% down. One big consideration is the local municipality and the rules around short-term rentals. So as long as we're talking about that, I'll throw that in there. Because that can be, I'll just speak from experience. We had ours all set to go. We ended up building a property down in California, and it's in Palm Springs, and very heavy vacation rental world there. Thought we were great. Right as we put our contract together and put our earnest money down, got ready to build, they put on the ballot that they were going to vote to decide if they want short-term rentals in Palm Springs. I was well, that's fun.
Great timing, guys.
So, we did our research, and so I throw that out there because it can literally be like lake to lake, city to city, area of town to area of town. So you just want to do all your research, and it's, exhausting, but it's worth it because you could get yourself into a situation where you own this property and it may not play out the way you want. Yeah. So, all that's the short-term rental side of it. But as far as having a rental property in town, to me, I need to do this as well. So I can.
Yes, you do, Brad.
I do. I need to. Yeah, exactly. We've always sort of we've kind of, I guess, sort of house hacked our own houses where we move every 2 or 3 years. That's kind of been our strategy. And then we did this other property. But I've got a lot of agents in the office that have, 10, 15. One is partnered up with someone with 52 doors. Wow. It's incredible. I mean, it's a ton of work. And there's a lot of aspects to it, but there's really no, you can pick it apart all you want, but it is a very sound and strong use of your cash and time to invest in for wealth, for sure.
Great. Okay. Yeah. And it is important from an investment standpoint to keep track of the costs, the repairs, because that is all part of your cost basis. So when you go to make a sale, it's important to keep all of those as well. And even on a residential home, it's important to know that too, because there are tax consequences if you have proceeds over a certain point. So good to keep those all in line as well. So talking about that logistically, what is it like to have a house in California that you have to take care of?
It's
probably pretty sweet.
It's lovely sometimes, but I will say a great example is this year we had to redo our pool heater. And, so remember, this is the mindset of a vacation rental, right? So you have to maintain the property in a way that's going to be attractive to people that want to rent it for a vacation, right? So the pool is a big part of that. We had a lot of repairs to do on the pool. That was actually about 6 years old. So things can just come up, right? Like we thought we were completely planning ahead and everything. So yeah, I think it's my take on it is that you can dial in your expenses as much as you possibly can. You're never going to know exactly every dollar. There's always going to be something. So you're going to always want a contingency, account, or maybe, as you receive that rent, put that in an account and don't necessarily spend it. Just, try to keep it in there as much as you possibly can for expenses. But honestly, like I know everyone wants a cash flow. There's two parts of this, and Brandon brought this up too, but it's just an asset that's going up in value. To me, that was one of the biggest components to me is like, if I can get someone to pay down my mortgage and cover all or most of my expenses, like I'm good with that. Like, we got very lucky because we were pre-COVID on that property, and Palm Springs is really like it's like the North Shore for LA,
right?
It's easy to go get up there. For us to the North Shore, right? Well, it's an hour and a half from LA. So that kind of became this like getaway during the time where nobody could do anything. Right. And so our property value doubled. Now, is that always going to happen?
Right.
No,
Yeah.
of course not.
Right.
But it's real estate. Over time, we're safely in that 3 to 5% a year type range. And oftentimes it's closer to 10% a year. So like just covering all or most of your expenses, in my opinion, is still a win. So that as a calculation, and everyone's different on that. There's a lot of spreadsheets out there for investors. They want to see X amount per month and they want to see the return. And of course, you should always shoot for profit, right?
Yes.
But if it's a long-term play and you're going to hold on to that property for a long time, if you have to kick in $3,000 at the end of the year, over 12 months, you had to have some expenses that came up. To me, well worth it, because how much of that mortgage did you pay down, and then how much did it appreciate? Right. Your equity is rising every year.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point. And I think actually the goal should be break even. Like you said, if anyone's going into real estate right now thinking they're going to get a golden property that's just going to kick off a bunch of money, it's just kind of not real.
Yeah, it's almost like it's an old conversation, right? Because that's not the way it is anymore. You're not.
Yeah, there was, first 6 months of COVID, maybe you could buy any property and people looking to go anywhere and would pay anything. But that's just not realistic. So I think that's, even in a duplex situation, like the goal is if you can break even, then that's awesome. And another thing that I love about what you said, and I've dipped my toe into investment properties kind of my whole career. That's a whole nother story. Some good purchases, not some good purchases. But this is how we learn. Always have extra money. If you think you need a little bit, have more, right? So don't get into that world without having a pile of money, not necessarily a pile, but enough, like 3 times more than you think, because you don't want to get in a scenario where you have to unload a property in maybe a not advantageous time because you're out of dollars.
Right.
So don't put yourself up against that wall. So also another thing that I thought was pretty cool and funny, we were talking about the fixing the pool at your place in Palm Springs, and some things that you don't think about, but you have to have your short-term rental be not move-in ready, but make it appealing to renters.
Oh, yeah.
We have
Top
kind
notch.
of a joke. We have also a short-term rental just about 45 minutes north of Minneapolis. Plug and
Lake life.
Is there a URL you could share? No.
Coming soon. URL. We kind of joke, my wife and I, Ann, that we spend more money on that property than our own home because it's a business,
right?
And we have to make it look like high end, and it has to appeal to people. We spend more on that property than we do on our own. So
that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And there's the advertising and getting out there too. I mean, that's a component to it too. It's not like you just have it and people are going to knock on your door and saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
can I rent this?
Yep.
You know, you have to be able to get it out there, and knowing who your target audience is for, whether it's a short-term rental or, you know, a rental home. In some cases, it's important to understand that as well too.
Yeah.
Right.
The best thing that you can do is pick a real estate professional and mortgage professional that has done that kind of purchase before.
Right.
So, so they can tell you all of the ins and outs and the quirks, and someone that's going to really counsel you on that. So,
Great. I think another kind of going off of that, talking about making it appealing to renters, what is it like to be the property manager of your own rental property? What are some things that you can take care of yourself, that you can learn how to take care of yourself, or things that are absolutely leave it to a professional?
That's a great,
Mr. General Contractor.
Well, yeah. Oh, geez. Okay. So from that hat, the first thing that comes to mind is that every city is going to have a rental license, most likely. And so your first baseline is you have to maintain that rental license. So the code items are going to be, you know, and actually Brandon can probably speak to a lot of this as a firsthand as a landlord and a property owner. But I would say you're going to always have to maintain that rental license sort of baseline code. And, you know, like I've seen and heard and shown a lot of properties that are investment properties where, you know, it's lipstick on a pig, total Band-Aid situation. You know, you can see everyone's sort of like investing just enough to maintain it, just enough to keep that rent coming in. But long term, you're just sort of kicking the can down the road, and your house is, you know, going to break down eventually at some point. So it's a different mindset than the short-term rental, right? Like that you want, you know, top quality, you want as pristine as possible, that fresh new feeling. For a rental property, it just kind of depends where it's positioned. You know, like I think you have to maintain quality. You know, you've got vacancy rates to consider. Like people will move out, you know, and ideally, I've got a lot of agents in our office that have a lot of rental properties. To them, and everything I've heard is the gold standard is trying to get a renter in that pays their rent on time and stays for multiple years, if not longer.
Right. Yeah.
You can get renters that care about your home just as much as though it is their home.
Right.
It is their home temporarily, and so you really, in order to attract an A+ renter, you're going to need to present your home in an A+ way. So I do think that you know, investment beyond, like we said, the payment, the insurance, everything like that, keeping that cash and reinvesting it into the property is super important. And I know a lot of people think of this as like, oh, I'm cash flowing $500 a month, so I'm going to take out $300 a month, and, you know, I don't know what you're going to do with that, but like to me, I would say leave that in there and let that pile up, because, you know, if anything, just reinvest it in that asset, because remember, you're paying your mortgage down and the value is going up. So that difference there is every year is going into your, you know, overall wealth.
Yeah. And an investment term that we use here at Stiles is GARP, so growth at a reasonable price. Oh, yeah. So that's something to think about too with what you're actually putting into the properties. So there are ways to make things look high end with not minimal cost, but reasonable cost, right?
Right.
So that's important to keep in mind too. So, you know, if you want to splurge and go way over what you'd ever get back for something on your own home, that's one thing, because you're living there, you're enjoying it. But, you know, people are not going to appreciate the things you appreciate probably if they're a renter, you know. So
well, I've had clients that have like purchased duplexes around town. So on that side of things, I've experienced it. I get the calls. Not that it's my problem or not that I've caused anything, but, you know, I hear about, hey, how's it going? How's that duplex doing? A great example is I had a guy that bought a duplex in Bloomington, really like 50s construction, which is great quality, by the way. Freshen that up. You can put those changes in there. Not a whole lot's going to change. There's not going to be a lot of like wild cards, in my opinion, from like late 1940s to 1950 up or newer. Side note. Like these 1910s, 1920s houses are like
charming,
yikes,
but yikes.
Yikes. Yeah. just going to say, I shouldn't, as a real estate broker and realtor, I shouldn't have a preference on houses, but I'll tell you, I'm, you know, a lot
That's
more
the
maintenance.
GC side of you.
A lot more.
Out,
Exactly. It's going to be pricey. So, but you know, here's a total wild card. He got everything done on the house. He spent $200,000 fixing up both sides. Basically gutted it. It was amazing. And they were beautiful properties that he offered to the market. These wonderful families moved. Everything was going great. the first spring they are like, into the summer, a huge tree in the back, limb falls down on the house. Insurance covers like the limb, but he has to take the tree out, and it was like $8,000. So like, there's all of his cash flow for that year. So like, stuff's gonna happen. But in the end, like, he has tons of equity in that property. It's gonna continue to appreciate. He has good renters. So like, you just kind of have to go with the flow a little bit. But going with the flow means reserving some cash.
Yeah, definitely. All right, what else do you want to talk about? Yeah.
Like I'd say the other aspect of it is management. Like you talked about, what is it like being a manager? And you Brandon, you have some rental properties. Do you self-manage them?
We self-manage them, but to be clear, that doesn't mean we do everything.
Right.
We just don't have a management company.
Yeah, right. Yep. You haven't outsourced all of it.
The person to go in and fix things. We're just the first line of defense, but we do surround ourselves with people that know how to do things, and we have relationships, and so the cost maybe can be a little bit cheaper, and they're going to do good quality work. And we did first start our short-term rental with the management company, actually, and they were perfectly fine, but they eat into any potential profits at all. Yeah. So if you can manage it yourself, do it, and then you get to learn all of the skills that can help you if you want to continue to grow. I think that's awesome. But what we like is the control, right? Some people maybe just want to plug and play and just don't want to worry about it, and they're okay if someone takes 10, 20, whatever the percentage is, depending on the property. But my wife and I, we kind of like the control. We like to know that it's going to be done immediately.
Right.
So if you have that kind of personality and you want to know it's going to be done correctly, then it's something you can do. You just have to have the team around you, because I'm not going to the property every single time something happens. Right. I just know who to call.
I would say a hybrid for us, and if this is any advice for anyone listening, take it, please. Like Brandon said, there are a lot of great companies out there, 20, 25%, maybe 30%, depending on what they do. But you're right. You block your dates out. They take care of everything after that. What we did is when we were going down to California to kind of research properties and see houses and try to get a feel for the market, we were staying in vacation rental houses ourselves. And one of the gentlemen that checked us in one time, his name is Marshall, really wonderful guy, super warm. I was like, wow, that was a really great experience. So I went to Marshall and I said, well, who do you work for? Is it a bigger company? Do you work for them? He's like, no, I they just pay me $500 a month, and then I'm sort of on call, and it's kind of a hybrid version. So I said, well, would you like another property? And he said, yes, I would. And I'll tell you, $500 a month is not 25% of our,
that's nothing.
Exactly. Right. Happily, we'll pay him that. He arranges our cleaners for us. He knows when the renters are going in and out. I made a spreadsheet with all of our bookings, when they're checking in. So I'm still pretty hands-on. Like, I know every renter that's going in there. But that's a hybrid as well, where you can kind of like what you were saying, but it's so tricky because we're, 1,500 miles away. So
correct.
A little different. Marshall just gets to go for a swim whenever he wants.
Yes, exactly.
500 plus.
Yes.
Swimming in a speedo whenever he wants.
Yeah,
when your guests are there. Yeah.
And what's great is if you find the right person, like I have Marshall check them in and check them out. And I like that because then the checkout is key as an owner, because you want them to walk through the house and find any damage or any issues that happen. Yeah. The renter thinks it's like a concierge service. So we kind of build it as a concierge service. But he's happy to check them in, and you can kind of build that as something that you're offering to the renters. Like, here's how you work the TV. And but there's lots of different ways to slice it. And if you really just want hands off there, usually in every sort of resort town or, vacation area, there's going to be a lot of companies, but it can be done. And like locally, there are plenty of companies as well. And I think, I would love to hear your take on this, but I hear a lot of people say it's about 10% of the rent. They'll kind of manage it.
So it depends on the type of property. So short-term rental, that's about 25%, right? That's a whole different thing. So for a standard rental, probably in the 8 to 12% range. And actually, for full hands off, that's not horrible. If there is a new rental or a turnover, though, you are still paying generally like 1 month rent to do that. So that, depending on where you are, if you're kind of a downtown condo versus a single family home where there's maybe a family that could stay there for a while, that can get pretty expensive. So kind of depends on the property as well. But if you can cash flow okay and you don't want to deal with it at all, 10% is not crazy, right? So something to think about.
Yeah. When it comes to figuring out what the price point is for what are you going to charge for rent on these properties? What do you guys see for that? Who would you seek out? How do you figure out what the market rate is?
I'll tell you, as a real estate agent and broker, it was maddening for me because I'm used to having the MLS and I can dial in the value of a property and both what I think it's worth and what I think it will sell for. So to me, not having the data and not having like the sold comps is really tricky. There are some websites out there that claim to give you the rented rate on a lot of properties. I will say, I'm wincing as I say this, Zillow.
I was going to say that one with the Z.
I would say 25%, like take that into consideration. It's a factor. It's not, clearly they're putting millions of dollars into these estimates. I would not price my home that way necessarily, but it's a good indicator. And then I just take the time and spend the time on, like, for short-term rentals. I would say go on Airbnb and go on, you got to find comps, you got to find comparable homes that work. You won't ever really know how much they actually got, but you'll kind of see, in this general range, wow, their calendar is really booked up. So obviously this price point's effective for them in general. And then, I think locally here, duplex or a single family home that you're renting out, I think you can kind of get a feel for it. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of trial and error too. You kind of try something for a little while and then you kind of just got to lower the price and find that bottom. But I'll let Brandon speak to that because it's more his wheelhouse.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot trickier than selling real estate. That's for sure. And the great thing about a short-term rental is the Airbnb platform, because that's kind of your MLS, I guess. What makes it a little bit tricky with that is you don't know if the bookings are their own bookings because that's with their family staying there, or if that's a real full booking. So there is always some trial and error, but you definitely have to just look at the other Airbnbs, be realistic about if you're a little bit better, if you're a little bit worse, right? Do you have Lakeshore? Don't you? Is there road noise, whatever it is, and just be truthful about that. And then, trial and error is really what it is. I think if you're renting a straight rental and it's more of a downtown condo, what you would do is look at the apartments, because those are the comps. And then you have to weigh their size versus their amenities. Are they new? Are they old? Versus people sometimes just like to be in a condo versus an apartment and vice versa. So again, a bit of trial and error, but that's where you would go for that. The single family homes, I really don't have any ideas, short of Zillow, but are just firing out a number and just seeing what happens.
I'll throw this out there. Speak with your real estate professional that you have a relationship with. If you don't, seek one. FoxRealty.com. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm totally kidding. It's actually FoxHomes.com.
Actually, mistake.
No, but
shameless plug. I'm glad that came up organically.
There are a lot of great agents out there, and even though you're not selling or buying with them, keep that, as Brandon said earlier, there should be a relationship there. Like, there are rentals on the MLS that they can source from, and that will actually show some rented comps. Engage with the people that you surround yourself with. Even though you're not buying or selling, those people should be very happy to help you with any sort of real estate needs. And if they aren't, then call me.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really great way to wrap it up, and just some considerations from the financial planning piece of it. So we've talked here about having people in your closet on your team, the experts that you can go to for, certain repairs or management or questions about financing and all that. From a financial standpoint, don't be expecting yourself to be able to understand all of it right away. Make yourself a team of people as well. So that can be, financial planners. It can be a tax professional. Tax professionals, I think, are very underrated and underutilized, but really helpful for thinking through some financial decisions too. And if they're not asking the questions about beyond just the numbers they need to plug in, then they're probably not doing it in your best interest, and they're not on your team to help you grow. So seek those people out. Start talking to people. There's more information out there than I think we realize. And that's kind of one of the joys about doing this podcast, is being able to bring in people to speak with us and give some tips and get people's brains thinking about things, and, maybe get a rental property. We'll see. Great. All right. Thanks, guys, for joining me today. Thank you all for joining us and listening.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time, and join us for Be in the Know. Thanks for joining us for this episode. For more info, make sure to follow Brandon Vitale, Brad Fox, and Stiles Financial Services on our socials so you can be in the know.
Stiles Financial Services is an SEC fee-only RIA in Minnesota. Information presented is for educational purposes only. No listener should assume that any discussion or information presented serves as the receipt of or the substitute for personalized advice from Stiles Financial or any other investment professional and is not intended as an offer of solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Stiles Financial Services is not a law firm or accounting firm, and no portion of this program should be interpreted as legal, accounting, or tax advice. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific needs.